This is the James Crepea Show.
We've got a blind date with destiny.
And it looks like she's ordered the lobster.
Oregonian columnist James Crepea.
I had some crackpot dynamite reporter at the first press conference ask me how in the heck we're going to possibly throw the ball when they keep a lid on their covers and who's the best pass rusher you've ever played against.
We're not the favorites. We're the other guys.
KORE 1050 and 95.7. Fox Sports Eugene. Here is the James Crepea Show, presented by Dairy Mart.
Hit the lights and lock the doors. Welcome, everybody, to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene on this Tuesday, September the 10th. I am James Crepea, the Oregon Ducks beat reporter for the Oregonian and Oregon Live. You can find all my work covering the Ducks, and we will get into them shortly. You can find the work of my colleagues, Nick Dashel, who covers the Beavers, as well as John Canzano, and the work that he does for us, as well as his radio program, which you hear here on KORE and Fox Sports Eugene in the midday from 12 to 3. And we start today recapping last night's Raiders win. It was quite a nice win and way to start the season for Oakland over the Broncos, getting a win out of the gate. And obviously after what had been a very, I don't want to overstate the tumultuousness of it all, but distracting, annoying antics with Antonio Brown and all the rest. And I know that John Gruden has said it wasn't distracting to us. We were doing just fine. We played the whole preseason without him.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, you know, what do you expect Gruden to say? To come out and say, like, yeah, by the way, man, oh, man, we just could not avoid. It's all anybody was talking about in circles on the outside world. It was unavoidable. And needless to say, they have moved on, and they got a win. In that win, Josh Jacobs, I would say, would probably be the story of the night. Rookie running back, 23 carries for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as a 23-yard reception. He is the first player since LaDainian Tomlinson with 100 scrimmage yards from offense and 2 touchdowns in his debut. So quite a debut for the former Alabama running back, now Oakland Raiders running back. That's awfully nice for the Raiders ground game to have him. Derek Carr went 22 of 26 for 259 yards and a touchdown, so also awfully nice. 22 of 26, hard to criticize much there.
Not a bad day.
It's pretty solid. Colin Farrell, the other first-round pick that most people felt the Raiders may have reached a little bit in getting him as high as they did, though he was still an outstanding player at Clemson. He got a sack in his NFL debut. So in the major stars category for the Raiders, checked a lot of boxes. Now, in the receiving realm, that one was a bit more of a mix. I'm not going to say that anybody didn't do well. It was just more of a mix. So you did see the tight end Weller, who obviously you saw in Hard Knocks. They chronicled him quite a bit. He contributed. He certainly filled out the box score a little bit. Tyrell Williams had 6 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. Again, Waller, 7 catches for 70 yards. Jacobs, as I mentioned, had the 1 for 28. Hunter Renfrow had 2 catches for 13 on 3 targets. So he quiet debut for Hunter Renfrow. Not bad, not great. Had a couple of catches, which that might have been all that, frankly, Denver was giving him. Now, on the other side of the ledger, for the Broncos, Joe Flacco, 21 of 31, 268, and a touchdown. Royce Freeman, 10 carries for 56 yards. Cortland Sutton had quite the big day. He basically caught almost half of the of the yards for the Broncos, 7 for 120. Emmanuel Sanders, 5 for 86, so the two and a touchdown. So the two of them combined had 12 for 206. And again, Flacco completing 21 of 31 for 268. So and took 3 sacks. So the Oakland defense had a pretty nice debut. 3 sacks, 6 tackles for loss. Carr did not get sacked. There were only 2 tackles for loss by the Broncos defense, which good luck trying to find a whole lot of people who would have ever picked the Broncos defense did not have very many tackles for loss in almost any game. And Von Miller, though he had 5 tackles, none for loss, not a particularly disruptive day for him. So Oakland gets off to a solid start on what was the last game of the NFL's opening weekend on Monday night, on the Monday night doubleheader. The Raiders pick up a 24-16 win. Pretty nice. And Jonathan Abram, the rookie safety, who, again, you also saw on Hard Knocks quite a bit, he had 5 tackles with a pass deflection. Vontaze Burfict, 6 tackles. LaMarcus Joyner, who joined the Raiders, I believe, this past offseason, 6 tackles with 1 for loss. So you see quite a bit of contributions across the board from young guys and from your prominent guys. If you are a Raiders fan in particular, a nice way to start the season. And for those who aren't necessarily Raiders fans, I just want to know how the Ducks and Beavers in the NFL handled everything in Week 1. Here's your rundown of the Beavers, and this is mainly the skill position guys, because what are you going to say about offensive linemen? They played. You can't, I mean, they don't record statistics, so it's hard to get into that. So of the skill position Ducks and Beavers in the NFL in Week 1, for the Beavers, Jordan Poyer, safety for Buffalo, had 9 tackles with a sack in a 17-16 win over the Jets, and the Jets did everything they could to give that game away in every way imaginable. In what will be an awful division again, and the Pats will go on and cruise. DJ Alexander, linebacker for Jacksonville, had 1 tackle in a 40-26 loss for Jacksonville to the Kansas City Chiefs. Matt Moore, 0-for-1 for Kansas City.
He got in the book.
He got on the ledger.
He got in the book.
When Pat Mahomes had a minor tweak, he got in the ledger for Kansas City in that loss, or excuse me, in that win over Jacksonville. Brandon Cooks, he had 2 catches for 39 yards in a win for the Rams over Carolina, 30-27. Johnny Hecker also had 3 punts, averaged 46 yards, a 68-yarder for the Rams in their win over the Panthers. And Steven Nelson, corner for the Steelers, had 3 tackles in the 33-3 whooping that the Patriots put on the Steelers. For the Ducks, Joe Walker, linebacker for Arizona, had 5 tackles in the tie for Arizona and the Detroit Lions. Kenyon Barner for Atlanta had 2 kickoff returns, 26 and 18 yards, 4 punt returns, so he contributed quite a bit on special teams. But nevertheless, a loss for the Falcons to Minnesota. Terrence Mitchell, cornerback for the Browns, had a tackle and a pass breakup in their loss to Tennessee. Again, we mentioned Royce Freeman. Troy Hill, corner for the Rams, had 2 tackles. Pat Chung had 6 tackles with a pass breakup in the Pats' beatdown of the Steelers. Eric Armstead had 5 tackles with a sack in San Francisco's win at Tampa Bay. DeForest Buckner also had 2 tackles, 1 for loss in San Francisco's win. Ugo Amadi was active. He had a couple of solo tackles in Seattle's win against Cincinnati. And Marcus Mariota went 14 of 24, 248, though, on just 14 completions, with 3 touchdowns, 3 carries, 24 yards in, again, what was a thrashing by Tennessee against the Browns. So that is your rundown of Ducks and Beavers in the NFL in Week 1. And speaking of the NFL, we have a big giveaway. Big giveaway coming up on today's show. If you would like to go to the game this Sunday between the Raiders and the Chiefs to see the 1-0 Raiders and their star running back and the Antonio Brownless and headacheless Oakland Raiders take on the Kansas City Chiefs and reigning MVP and video game cover boy and video game numbers passer, Pat Mahomes. We are giving away a pair of tickets later in today's show. Keep listening. We will give away a pair of tickets to the Raiders-Chiefs game on Sunday. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Steve. These tickets are quite good.
That's an understatement.
These tickets are perhaps even extraordinary. These are not just get in the building and sit in the rafters. These tickets are in a suite. So keep listening. We will give away a pair of tickets in a suite for the Raiders-Chiefs game on Sunday. We will also have a pair of tickets to Oregon State's home game this weekend against Cal Poly. That, I believe those tickets are also quite nice.
They are also quite nice.
Yes. So we will be giving a pair of tickets away for Oregon State's home game against Cal Poly. We'll be giving away a pair of tickets for the Raiders-Chiefs in a suite on Sunday. Keep listening to the show. Be ready to call us on the Davis Roofing hotline at 541-343-KORE. You can call now if you want. We're not giving away tickets right now. But you can call now if you want to weigh in on the NFL or other things going on, Ducks, Beavers, or etc. But we will be giving away those tickets later in the show, again, to both of those games. So keep listening.
We've got to figure
close to the
something
phone.
out. We've got to figure out something kind of extraordinary. We got to find a Raiders fan that really, really wants to go because these are amazing tickets.
Yes, they are.
I mean,
Yes, they are. They are really, really good.
Freaking
tickets.
sweet, man. And it's not Peter Griffin going, freaking sweet.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes. So very good tickets. So again, keep listening. We will be giving away a pair for both Oregon State and for Oakland to keep an eye on. NFL Week 1 is complete. So what are some of the reactions and overreactions from Week 1 in the NFL? If you want to weigh in on that, by all means, give us a call on the Davis Roofing hotline at 541-343-KORE. That's 541-343-5673. And weigh in on that. Somebody, I believe, already has and wanted to try and get tickets.
cheater.
And like I said, you got to keep listening. Got to keep trying. It's not yet. Not yet. We're holding out a little bit. But what are some of the reactions, overreactions? I will say one, just general reaction. I'm going to say this is an overreaction. Just general reaction. I don't care what Beckham wears. I do not care. Okay? And if this watch really is plastic, then good for him. And if he wants to take on the burden and potential injury risk that comes with wearing jewelry during a game, that's his choice.
Yeah, but he could endanger other people.
That's
If the glass breaks.
Well, that's the thing is it glass? Is it plastic? He'll tell you it's plastic.
It still could be sharp and gouge somebody. I mean,
Well,
if
in
he's
that
fighting
case,
off,
Steve,
if he's fighting off a
Steve,
DB and he puts the arm under his neck,
Steve.
come on.
In that case, I mean, you're going to tell me that every piece of a face mask could come flying off too? I mean,
No, I broke my arm on one though.
there is a point that sooner or later, like, there are inherent risks. Now, as it is in the rule book today, and they're not going to change it on the fly, by rule, there is no rule against wearing jewelry. Because there are plenty of guys who wear chains and stuff like that. And again, that's a personal choice. And ultimately, it's underneath shoulder pads, unless it goes flying,
Right.
Which you do see. Okay. Just as I don't care how players wear their hair, but players who obviously have either longer hair or dreads, and it hits the nameplate, it becomes something that somebody can grab legally.
Right.
And you've seen instances of that. Again, personal decision, personal choice. But the only person being risked by and put in any kind of harm's way by that potentially is the person making that decision. I don't care whether the watch is, he even mentions, oh, if this is just somebody wearing a watch for $20, nobody would care or whatever, but because it's a Richard Mille watch and it's worth, about as much as a house, and it's me, then it's drawing all the attention. I don't care. I don't. Again, personal choice. If he wants to go out there and waste his money doing that and draw attention to himself for doing something so ridiculous as this, fine. Okay. But I'm with you, Steve, as long as definitively outside of something truly extraordinary, well, if it breaks or whatever, hey, if he wants to take on the risk of if he lands on it wrong and it could break in some way or do something crazy and hurt him, well, that's Odell Beckham Jr.'s choice. He can do that. But I'm with you in that if it's something that gets so ridiculous, because now what if I go out there and I decide to wear a Russian diving metal watch that weighs 2 pounds? Oh, well, that's okay. What? And it gets a bit much. So I don't care that he's doing it. It doesn't bother me. Doesn't make a difference to me. It's ridiculous, but it doesn't matter to me. But I am in the safety capacity. Here, just chalk this up to one of the many differences between the NFL and college football. If a college football player did this, they would never hear the end of it. Every fan base, the opposing rival fan base would go bananas. The coach would have to issue comments. There'd have to be apologies. The NCAA would go bananas. The conference would weigh in. It would get ridiculous. In the NFL, it's, all right, it's a story for the day, and because it's Beckham, it really becomes a story. But then it will just die in like a week. Other than if he scores a touchdown and like the ball bounces off of it or something ridiculous, then it'll come up again. But it'll last for like 5 minutes. But the celebrations or the self-centeredness of some players or whatever, that's just part of the professional realm. You just chalk it up to that. Whereas, again, in the college realm, they can't even spike a football without it being considered excessive celebration. They've gone overboard the other way. Way overboard the other way in the collegiate realm. Again, coming up in today's show, first off, our guest today, at the bottom of the hour, we'll have Dan Wolken of USA Today to cover several things around the Pac-12, but we will be spending quite a bit of time talking about the USC athletic director search, obviously with Lynn Swann resigning, Dan being one of the national guys who covers quite a bit in the major athletic realm and knows a lot of athletics administrators, agents, etc. So he's very plugged into that world, has reported already on it. We'll be speaking with him about that at 4:30. And at 5:15, although we'll chat with other things with Dan as well, at 5:15, we'll keep it quite USC specific with Antonio Morales again of The Athletic. He will join us again to start in with the AD search. And then obviously Kedon Slovis' big debut and USC's win against Stanford, which featured also defensively, while Slovis gets all the attention. Here's a number that stuck out to me in that game. 10 tackles for loss by the USC defense against Stanford.
Well, they're thinner on the offensive line than they used to be.
I understand that Walker Little is out and now out for the year.
Oof.
And that Costello wasn't playing, but 10 tackles for loss by a Stanford O-line. Go back and find me the last time that happened.
That's got to be a while.
That's my point.
That's probably pre-Harbaugh.
So we will go and chat with him at 5:15. And again, keep listening. We'll be giving away a pair of tickets to Oregon State's game against Cal Poly. Those are also very, very good seats. And keep listening for the pair of tickets for the Raiders and Chiefs, which are in a suite. So, yes, keep listening for that as well. You're listening to The James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. For those who want to know, because some have already called asking, what time are you giving away the tickets? Well, we're not going to tell you that right now. That's the whole point. So we're giving away, again, for those who missed it, a pair of tickets to the Oregon State game on Saturday against Cal Poly that are very good seats, and a pair of tickets to the Raiders-Chiefs game on Sunday in a suite. Now, if you want to know what time, follow me on Twitter, at James Crepea. That's CREPEA. Follow me. My messages are open. And I will message you the time that we are giving away the pair of tickets to one or both. You let me know which one you want to know about, and I will tell you what time. I'm not going to give them to you, but I will tell you the time. So if you want to know, follow me on Twitter, at James Crepea, and I will let you know. You can also follow the station at KORE 1050 Eugene. And Steve will let you know. So follow us if you want to know the time. They were giving away a pair of tickets to both the Raiders-Chiefs and Oregon State-Cal Poly. Both are very, very good pairs of tickets. The Raiders tickets are sweet tickets.
Yes.
To watch the Chiefs and the video game offense and reigning MVP, Pat Mahomes. So do keep listening. And again, follow me on Twitter or Steve on Twitter at the station at KORE 1050 Eugene. And let us know, and then we will tell you what time, so that way you are that much more prepared for when we're doing that. Some Oregon updates and personnel and other things that some of it I meant to get to yesterday, some that we got into a little bit today. First, so the Ducks played 77 players last Saturday in the 77-6 onslaught of Nevada. See, today I'm saying it is Nevada.
Yay!
It's Nevada. It's Nevada.
Thank you.
Okay. In the 77-6 win over Nevada, the Ducks played 77 players. Obviously, there is a significant number of players who are dealing with injuries at the moment. We're not going to go through all of them. Obviously, the wide receiver and tight end position in particular, quite a good number. Some of those who were healthy scratches or players who just didn't find their way on the field. There were a handful of true freshmen who I would say are the most likely redshirt candidates, and it shouldn't come as any surprise. Not going to rattle through all of them, but for instance, like Cale Millen obviously did not get in the game. And he's your third-team quarterback, and Tyler Shuck needed to get as many opportunities as possible. So, obviously, you're not putting Cale Millen in the game. In a game, even as lopsided as it was, the point was to get Shuck as many opportunities as possible. And look, not to say that Cale Millen may not get an opportunity this week if the score is the same, but first things first, they wanted to get Tyler Shuck as many opportunities. So, for instance, he was one of those guys. Javon Wilson was another. Jonah Teano was another. Isaac Townsend, Trevin Mai, Triquez Bridges. I believe that covers almost everybody. I want to be sure in my head. Yeah, that basically is everybody from the true freshman realm. Now, of the guys who were the true healthy scratches, one, well, obviously, I mean, you didn't punt very much. So Maimone handled the punts, the few that there were, and Tom Snead didn't punt. All right, well, okay. Adam Stack got in there and punted once, and now he's since left, which is the second bit we neglected to mention yesterday. Yes, Adam Stack has left the program, moving to look for an opportunity to obviously become a full-time kicker after losing the competition to Camden Lewis, and understandable. He was Oregon's kicker last year. Obviously, was coping with not being exactly 100%, and then the spring was recovering from hernia, and competed for the starting job. And just like at a quarterback position, you see that that's crazy in the portal. Well, obviously, time is not on your side, and when a true freshman has won the job, and not just won the field goal job, but won the field goal and kickoff, well, there's only so many areas. And a senior has locked down the punting position for the remainder of the season. Not a lot of opportunities out there for Adam Stack, so he is choosing to move on. He was one of the guys who was, he took part, but Snee did not. The others, we heard from Mario Cristobal that Andrew Johnson, Jr., linebacker, he had tweaked his hamstring during last Friday's young guy scrimmage, but should be okay this week. We'll see if he gets in this week's game. The others that stood out to me were, one, J.J. Tucker, who did not dress. That's, according to Mario, that was not even injury-related. That was just a decision to play other receivers more, which only a few days earlier in the week, when I'd asked about J.J. Tucker and Isaiah Crocker, who did play on the field, he did not record reception or a statistic, but he did appear in the game. He said, it's got to be all hands on deck because of just the lack of depth, obviously, of the position due to all the various mounting injuries. Well, Tucker didn't dress. Not just, didn't play, didn't dress. That one stood out to me, and apparently not due to an injury, according to Mario Cristobal. And the other was junior college transfer linebacker Drew Mathis. It did not appear in the game. Now, on one hand, sort of understandable because Samson New was quite productive. Obviously had an interception, forced a fumble. MJ Cunningham got a good number of reps as well. So, and it was not the only inside linebacker who didn't get a lot of time, and they wanted to get the second team as much as possible. But Drew Mathis was a mid-year enrollee because he's a junior college transfer, and he was running with the second team during the spring. So the idea that he didn't get on the field just yet was a little bit surprising. And I asked Mario about that, and he just said they expect him. He's getting closer to being able to go out on the field, and they're working with him on special teams as well as defense. And, hey, look, fact is right now there is a little bit of a logjam in that inside linebacker area as far as obviously Troy Dye is up at the top with Isaac Slade Matuatia in the starting Mike position. Then you've got Samson New at third as far as just veteran experience and a returning guy with game experience. And MJ Cunningham has clearly separated himself from the rest of that group. And they wanted to get the second team guys as many reps as possible. So could Drew Mathis be the next guy? Possibly. But he was one who stood out. So those of the DNPs, that's the explanation on Mathis and Tucker. Again, Stack transferring. Perfectly understandable. We'll look to see where he lands in the, hopefully for him, near future. And potentially, if it's the right place, potentially I would think. Well, actually, I was going to say would think be eligible, but I think he would have to go down. And because he was active this season, I don't even know if that's possible. But be that as it may, we'll see where he ends up. The other story, and I'm not going to go at length about it because without knowing exactly the particulars, other than what the police had mentioned, obviously, yes, as I had reported, it was first reported by Matt Preem at 24/7, but walk-on kicker Zach Emerson, who had handled kickoffs last year, was arrested on a pair of misdemeanor charges last week on September the 2nd, early in the morning. The Eugene police had gotten back to me after yesterday's show and said that it was due to his basically banging on an apartment door at about 6 o'clock in the morning that Monday, and the resident of that apartment had gotten up to, as they put it, to kind of investigate like what was going on. They left, and that resident called police. When they showed up, they found Mr. Emerson in the bathroom, unconscious, and what have you. Now, we have not gotten any word officially from Cristobal or Emerson or anything like that. He is still with the program. Obviously, certain fans have weighed in on social media to say basically the take of who among us would cast the stone on this matter. But it is obviously still a serious matter because it gets into legal stuff. So just mentioning all those things. We'll chat more about the Ducks coming up with our guest, Dan Wolken of USA Today. You are listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. And we welcome in our first guest of the program, Mr. Dan Wolken of USA Today. Does a fine job, obviously, from a national perspective in the college sports realm and plenty of other things, because Dan is quite the horse racing expert and an avid tennis guy, among other things. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Hey, what's happening?
Living the dream, brother. Living the dream on the West Coast now. I moved cross-country from you compared to where we were before. You still residing in Atlanta. But you've weighed in on the news of the week at the moment in the Pac-12, being the USC athletic director search. What, from your vantage point, because I know you're quite well plugged in that community, what is the latest in that search process? Who are some of the hot names to be considered for this opportunity?
Yeah, I think they've done a lot of the groundwork to make a hire. I think they have a good sense of who might be interested and who definitely isn't interested. But I think the biggest thing that I've gained from talking to people about it is that there's a clarity with the president, Carol Folt, who comes from North Carolina, that this is not going to be the USC Letterman's Club again. This is going to be a professional search, and they're going to go get somebody who has experience as an athletic director, who knows how to run a program. And I think a lot of people who are, either big boosters or former players or former coaches, they think that you can just kind of roll out of bed and because you are a well-known person or that you've got skills in another area of business, that those things translate to college athletics, and they really don't in most cases. So I think it's good news for USC that they're going out, talking to sitting athletic directors. Whether someone who's got a very good Power 5 job is going to be willing to go there is maybe a little bit complicated because there's a lot of factors of living in Los Angeles and the cost of living and the commute times, and that doesn't necessarily fit everybody's lifestyle. But I think they'll find somebody who's got some pretty good credentials who's going to be interested in that.
I was going to say, yeah, you've touched on a little bit there, Dan, but what would you say about the job? Because from a football head coaching job perspective, it's probably in the top – it's definitely top 20. I'm not sure if it's still top 10 at the moment. Probably not. But from an AD perspective, I'm not sure if it's even that high, if it is necessarily top 20, because on one hand, it's obviously a very big department and led by a football program, but at the same token, it is now a lot more competitive in the LA marketplace, and you mentioned about obviously the lifestyle and commute and all the things that go into living in Los Angeles. So what are some of the things from your perspective that would make this job appealing or not so appealing to potential candidates, whether they're a sitting AD at a Power 5 school or not?
Well, I think it's a pretty attractive job, and I think a lot of people who are in that AD world certainly like the idea of working at a private school. That makes sometimes things a little easier to get done. You don't necessarily have to deal with a lot of the bureaucracy and red tape to get things done that you do sometimes at public schools. So that's something that would be a positive. USC's got fans and boosters and people in Hollywood who give lots of money to that program. Fundraising's very easy relative to a lot of places. So I think that's a big positive. Their facilities are very good. Their Olympic sports programs are renowned. And obviously football, there's an opportunity to go in there and be the savior, to be the person who resurrects it. And USC has the potential to resurrect it because it's USC. So I think all those things are really appealing. You're going to go in there and likely be able to make a football hire. So there's a lot to like about it. But at the same time, you're also going to be dealing with a lot of situations that are going to take up time early in your tenure. The FBI stuff with college basketball, that's still lingering. Is there going to be an NCAA investigation into USC basketball? The varsity blues admissions scandal, that's still impacting USC, and who knows where that's ultimately going to end up. A lot of drama, and you're going to have to do a lot of cleaning house and step on some toes, frankly, of the old guard there who are tied in with people, and that's going to be tough. So there's a lot of complications to it, but I think overall, if you talk about potential to make an impact at a place that has been very poorly managed, but obviously has a lot of potential, that's, I think, a pretty good situation for an athletic director to be in.
Chatting with Dan Wolken of USA Today. You can follow him on Twitter at Dan Wolken. You mentioned, obviously, the football front for USC, Dan, one way or another, and obviously they've started 2-0, and they've still got a bear of a schedule to go, but they have started 2-0. And even with a quarterback change due to injury, Slovis obviously had quite the debut, and their defense did quite well against Stanford. Will this AD, do you think, because if they are an outsider in particular, and not from the USC tree, if they have to make a decision on Clay Helton one way or another, without, because I'm not as literate in the politics of the USC Letterman's Club, do you think this new AD will actually have the power and authority to make the decision, or will it still be some of those power brokers who ultimately weigh in and make the call on Clay Helton one way or another?
No, I think obviously someone who goes in there to take that job is going to have some assurances that they're going to have autonomy to make those decisions. And I think the fact that you've got a new school president there is a huge factor. You know, that everything she's done so far has made the statement that this is going to be run differently, and that the people who, you know, have their little protectors around the program, that's not necessarily going to be all that important anymore. That you're going to have professional people coming in there and running an athletic department, not based on cronyism, but based on the best way to win. So I think that's part of what is going to go into this search and who's going to end up getting the job. And I think I feel pretty confident that the new president there is not going to, I would say this, I think the president is going to empower whoever gets that job to do whatever they think they need to do.
Are there some names that you think are standing out? Because a lot have been thrown out there. However, some in the non-Power 5 realm that do stand out a lot are, in particular, at UNLV, Desiree Reed-Francois, who is very well regarded in the industry. Villanova's Mark Jackson. Nevada's Doug Newth. Obviously, Bubba Cunningham, the feeling is if he really wanted the job, he probably would have had it already. But those have been among the names, and there are many, many, many others. It would take forever to get through them all. But are those some that you've either heard, or do you think it will be one of those, or is it going to be somebody off the grid that maybe we're not hearing about right now?
Yeah, I mean, those names have all been kind of bantered about. Some others, you know, Martin Jarmond at Boston College, who, by the way, did work with Urban Meyer at Ohio State when he was there, is one that I've heard a little bit could be in the mix. You know, somebody like that would make a lot of sense. I've heard more, you know, sort of definitive information probably about people that they've reached out to who aren't going to take the job or who are happy in their current situations. But yeah, all the names you mentioned, I think, could be in play based on the way things fall. But they're going to take some big swings first, I think, and see who might who might be interested, especially if they're willing to pay a decent amount of money.
Shifting gears to the on the field, Dan, I know it's very early, but what are your thoughts at the moment about SC football and Clay Helton? And all right, they're 2-0, and again, it's with a freshman quarterback, albeit because Daniels got hurt and is out for the year. But again, Slovis had a huge debut, and the defense is playing pretty well. So, what are your thoughts at the moment of a team that obviously it's not a gimme with BYU this week, but they should handle business, and at that point, that game against Utah is enormous. What are your thoughts right now, early in this season, about USC football and if Clay Helton can save himself right now?
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out more as it goes along, but I think those key games, Utah, Notre Dame, if they don't show up in those games, then they're going to be in trouble. I don't think, I think the worst thing you can do when you're looking at a coach is kind of just go off of record. I think you need to say, okay, what's the standard for this program? And when you play programs of like stature or that are in a stratosphere that you aspire to be, how do you stand up to that challenge? And I think the biggest problem with Helton as a coach has been that by and large, they've kind of been exposed when they've played the top tier teams as, really a couple notches below. And I think that's been the biggest problem. Even the year they won the Pac-12, they play Ohio State in a bowl game. They got absolutely hammered. Notre Dame's gotten them good a couple times, by big margins. And I just think it says, okay, it's fine if you want to go, beat the, kind of the middle and lower tier Pac-12 teams and even a couple of the good ones. But what does that really mean? What does that really say about where you're going and whether you can compete for national titles? The recruiting's not been very good. Like, I just think you have to evaluate where they are with Helton holistically and not just based on, okay, well, they looked pretty good in the last game.
Oh, no question. No, you can't overreact in this one because it is the monumental decision if you have to move on from a coach. And if he's having some success, that certainly helps you if you're a new AD in particular. But, no, you can't overreact to it either. No, for sure. It just happened to be that Stanford is obviously pretty good, even if they are dealing with a quarterback situation of their own at the moment. But, yes, we will definitely learn more in the near future on SC. Elsewhere in the Pac-12, obviously Chip Kelly is currently bombing, and UCLA is quite literally giving away tickets to what could be an even bigger onslaught against Oklahoma on Saturday. On one hand, it's a nice win for Cal. On the other hand, it's a pretty tough loss for Chris Peterson and Washington back-to-back years to Cal this past Saturday at home, late due to the weather situation. Kevin Sumlin has inherited a tough spot, but defensively they're a bit of a mess right now. What's your view of kind of these either middling in some cases or bottom tier of the Pac-12, not in Oregon? We'll get to Oregon in a moment, but the non-Oregon schools, whether it's UCLA, Washington, Arizona. What's your take on some of these more prominent names that we're seeing have some struggles at the moment?
Well, the results overall for the Pac-12 have not been good in terms of the national perception. And Washington losing this early in the year to Cal, it hurts from the standpoint of, Washington probably going to be out of the playoff conversation pretty quick. And that's unfortunate for a team that going into the year, a lot of people thought was going to win the league and had a real shot to make the playoff and frankly didn't have a very challenging or tough looking schedule. And, but I kind of look at that and say, Washington's kind of been a little fraudulent the last couple of years, and they've lost a bunch of these games. They more than they should to programs that they should be beating. And so when you're consistently losing to Cal, when you lose the game a couple of years ago to Arizona State, it just doesn't indicate that you're on that same level as the programs that are making playoff more consistently. So you kind of have to write them off. And, Arizona, not only anyone expected them to be good, but they're obviously pretty bad. It was a good win for Colorado. I don't know what that's going to turn into, but, Colorado looks like a team that's got some promise and certainly is going to be better than maybe a lot of people thought they were going to be. Utah's taking care of business so far, but what are they really? Cal's going to have an opportunity to go to Ole Miss, but that's not really going to be a signature win for the league. So it's tough to kind of look at where the big bright spots are.
And now to the Oregon schools. Obviously, they're a little bit on opposite ends of the spectrum at the moment due to the rebuild at Oregon State. But I know it's a missed opportunity for the Ducks losing to Auburn in the opener, but certainly held their own. In particular, the offensive line really held its own against potentially the best defensive line in the country. What is your view of Mario Cristobal in year two and where this program might end up by the end of this season? Obviously, they're still in the mix. I know they're probably they're well on the outside looking in at the moment by way of any playoff conversation, but they can work their way back there. What's your view from a national perspective of Cristobal and the Ducks right now?
Well, I think Cristobal's doing all the big things well at Oregon, but the little things when you get into these high leverage games really, really matter because games are won and lost on such small margins when the talent is similar. And so Oregon blew that game against Auburn. Like there's just no other way to say it. They blew it, 10 different ways. And they should have won. And if they had, it's a totally different conversation and narrative and picture that they're looking at in terms of where this season could go. So I just think it's unfortunate when you're recruiting as well as they have at Oregon. And I understand the identity they're trying to build, and I think it's correct in the approach. Like that's a great foundation for what you want to do. But you can't, have a game a year where you lose because of whether it's just coaching mistakes or game management or whatever you want to call it. That's tough, and it adds up, and you start to question a lot of what they've done. So I'm not writing off Mario Cristobal. Don't get me wrong. Like as I said, the big stuff you have to do to compete at the highest level, they're doing well. But when the Pac-12 is what it is, your non-conference opportunities are small. To not take advantage of a game that you were the better team is, I think, it's a tough thing to come back from to start the season.
And we'll get you out of here on this, Dan. We've been chatting with Dan Wolken of USA Today. Again, follow him on Twitter at Dan Wolken. I realize that from a national perspective, Oregon State is not necessarily going to be on a lot of people's radars amid a massive rebuild, and I would argue it's got to be right up there with some of the biggest rebuilds in the sport right now, by way of either what Les Miles inherited at Kansas or what was going on in Louisville or elsewhere. But I would say Oregon State was certainly in the conversation of biggest Power 5 rebuilds over the last several years. Jonathan Smith inherited a tough spot. He's an alum. That said, I don't know if you stayed up into the wee morning hours on the East Coast to watch the Facebook Live broadcast, but there was some really questionable decision-making in that one. What does Oregon State, what does Smith have to do to even become a blip on the national radar by way of showing real progress? I understand, pull some monumental upset. I understand that. But, I mean, short of something just totally outlandish, like, a win over Oregon or something at the moment, what would it take for them to get back into, like I say, even just to get on the radar screen right now?
Well, I think that for any new coach, if you get to a bowl game in your first couple of years, then you start to get a little bit of credibility. You get people talking about, oh man, they went from 1-11 or 2-10 to 6 wins, and that's going to be really great for their program. Those are the kinds of conversations that happen, even if nobody watches the games. And I'll be the first to admit, like, I would have to get really, really far down the list of games I'm interested in to come to an Oregon State game. Like, just at this point, it's too difficult for me to bypass other games to watch Oregon State most of the time. So I don't know what they're working with talent-wise, and I'm not close enough to it to understand, the hole that has been dug that they're trying to get out of. But that's going to be really, really tough. I just think, it starts with good scheduling, schedule some wins, find a win here or there in conference play, and all of a sudden maybe you're 6-6, and then all of a sudden you start to turn the conversation. But it's tough when you inherit a program that's at that kind of low ebb with the whole Gary Anderson disaster. And I don't envy him, but I know he's an alum, and I know that he probably understands the program better than most. The question is just whether he's got the goods to do it.
Appreciate you, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us. Look forward to having you on later in the season.
Okay, thank you.
You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. For those just joining us, we will be giving away a pair of tickets to Saturday's game with Oregon State and Cal Poly. These are club tickets. So keep listening. In the not-too-distant future, we will be giving away a pair of club tickets to Saturday's game for Oregon State, Cal Poly. Keep listening. We'll let you know when to call in on the Davis Roofing Hotline at 541-343-KORE to win those. We are also giving away a pair of tickets to Sunday's game between the Raiders and the Chiefs in a suite. So these are very, very nice seats. We'll be giving those away as well. Again, you can follow either me on Twitter at James Crepea, that's CREPEA, or you can follow the station, KORE 1050 Eugene, on Twitter. Follow us. Messages are open for me. Ask, as someone already has, hey, what time are you giving away the X tickets? And I will let you know if you follow me on Twitter and ask. If you don't, well, then I can't help you. You got to keep listening. You're going to have to find out. It will be soon. Elsewhere in college football, as I mentioned in the conversation with Dan there, yes, UCLA literally giving away 4 tickets per season ticket holder who attended last weekend's monstrosity that was UCLA's loss to San Diego State. The announced attendance at the Rose Bowl for that was roughly 50% of the building capacity. If you saw the pregame seating from some of the beat reporters who were there, there were far fewer than that. So if you attended last weekend's debacle, an embarrassment to UCLA and the Pac-12, lucky you get 4 complimentary tickets to this weekend's game, which will be a showcase for Jalen Hurts and the Oklahoma offense. That is.
This is the James Crepea Show.
We've got a blind date with destiny.
And it looks like she's ordered the lobster.
Oregonian columnist James
I
Crepea.
had some crackpot dynamite reporter at the first press conference ask me how in the heck we're going to possibly throw the ball when they keep a lid on their covers and who's the best pass rusher you've ever played against.
We're not the favorites. We're the other guys.
KORE 1050 and 95.7. Fox Sports Eugene. Here is the James Crepea Show, presented by Dairy Mart.
The suspension of Oregon State offensive lineman Gus Lavaka for the first half of Saturday's game between the Beavers and Cal Poly, as well as cornerback. There's a little bit of banter back and forth about, did Jonathan Smith do enough? Did he not do enough? What was the right way to go about it? Look, I again say, if it were not for the infighting suspension that had to be addressed between Caleb Hayes and him getting into it with Avery Roberts and Hayes being suspended, then I personally am of the belief that Lavaka would not have been suspended and should not have been suspended. But because Smith had no choice but to do something to Caleb Hayes, then he could not possibly not do something to Lavaka. So I think he got pigeonholed there a bit. It's for the first half for both players, so it's equal whether you're swinging at a teammate or swinging at an opponent after the game is over. neither received a penalty on the field and in the game, but they will be receiving a penalty in the game going forward. Well, my colleague Nick Daschel, who we had on yesterday's show, he's caught up with Lavaka today at Oregon State. Here's some of what Gus Lavaka had to say and talking to the Oregonian and Oregon Live today. I was too in my emotions, and I got caught up in the moment. I did something stupid. I threw punches. I'm not proud of it. And Lavaka said that he was not reacting to something that the Hawaii players or any one Hawaii player or anything said. He was just upset that he didn't block better on Oregon State's final play, which if you watched, obviously was this big lateraling move as they tried to set up something cross field in order to kind of open up a lane as best as they could to make a miraculous play happen. Says it was in my head. I was like, get out of my way. All of a sudden, stuff happens, and he took a few steps away, and then the fight took place. I definitely regretted it. Dang, it sucks. I might be out for the next game is what he was thinking. This isn't me. Why did I do this? I'm not the kind of guy to fight, not even in practice. In my head, I was so mad. Again, I looked at it and thought, hey, Lavaka threw an elbow. The Hawaii player had a pretty good shove at the end. I would argue the retaliation there was maybe even worse, but okay. And then Lavaka's retaliation to the retaliation. You want to say there was too much? I'm not telling you that Lavaka should have thrown a punch. I'm just saying that because the shove was his elbow, while uncalled for, was not that aggressive. The shove was pretty aggressive. And I really don't mind the punch as much because I just kind of view it as the guy was defending himself. He didn't know if he was dealing with one guy or 10 guys. And, of course, he's annoyed after an emotional game that came down to the final couple of minutes. And it goes down that way, and he's on the opposing sideline. All right. So I don't mind that one as much. Whereas infighting on a team, while I'm not going to act like it was the first time ever, that one I think needed to be dealt with a little bit more. But, again, I think Jonathan Smith had no choice but to act. If you are looking for the pair of club tickets to Oregon State, be the fifth caller on the Davis Roofing Hotline at 541-343-KORE. That's 541-343-5673. And you will win a pair of tickets to Oregon State Cal Poly. Club tickets to Saturday's game. Again, be the fifth caller on the Davis Roofing Hotline at 541-343-KORE. And you will win the pair of tickets to Oregon State and Cal Poly. Elsewhere in the college football realm today, this was a remark early this morning that I literally could not believe it was real, just because Malzahn never says anything of particular ilk, but it very much was real. In his opening remarks at his game week press conference, Auburn coach Gus Malzahn was speaking of the game this week that Auburn has with Kent State. Said the game is at 6 o'clock, and proceeds to say, personally, I wish it was at noon so we'd have more time to prepare for our next opponent. And if you caught the end of yesterday's show, the real origins of this was in response to Alabama issuing statements and reactions to its game against Southern Miss in a couple of weeks being an early game. And Alabama issuing statements in dissatisfaction and that it's annoyed and upset that it will have another early game, early home non-conference game in particular. Now, obviously, Alabama being upset or not has nothing to do with anything. The networks are going to choose to air the games when they damn well feel, they're paying the bills, they're providing the check. They get to pick when it's on their network. So the networks, I can assure you, could care less that Alabama's not happy. Could care less. They deal with them enough and give them enough airtime and everything else. They could care less that the non-conference game with Southern Miss at 11 a.m. Central is annoying them. They don't care. That said, I understand Alabama's perspective a little bit in that they have had a good number of non-conference home games earlier in the day than others in the SEC since the SEC network was launched in I believe it was 2014. So I get where they're coming from with that, in particular because the heat index in September. Look, last week the real field temperature was over 100 degrees. and that's not exactly great by way of game day experience, fan experience. And additionally, it's not just what's happening in the stadium that matters very much to the institution. It is what happens all around the stadium environment, from tailgating to hotels and everything else. Earlier games, even in tailgate-happy areas in the SEC, mean that fans probably aren't staying Saturday night. Whereas if it's a Saturday night game, I can assure you those folks are staying not just Saturday night.
I don't
They
know.
are staying Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night.
I don't know if you're going to have a lot of people really crying in their beer here.
Oh, I'm not telling you
with the late
sympathize.
kickoffs. With the
I
late
was providing
kickoffs.
context for the response from Malzahn. I don't tell you to shed a tear at all. I'm saying I understand their perspective and giving you the context for Malzahn's remarks. So because Alabama issued their statements regarding that, which have some merit, though I'm not telling you to cry boo for them. I'm just telling you that their remarks have some merit. Now, but because of that, in the rivalry there, Malzahn decided to open up and, like I say, oh, well, we got a 6 p.m. game against Kent State. Personally, I wish it was at noon so we'd have more time to prepare for the next opponent. Now, obviously, yes, that is a shot at Alabama and Saban and everything else, which goes over just fine with the fan base. This is the ultimate no-lose, though, as I said to somebody earlier today. I said this is a no-lose scenario. On one hand, all politics, local politics, so Malzahn gets the short-term win because he throws some shade at Alabama. If things go awry, loses to Alabama or loses a whole bunch of games before that, he's out. Who cares? I mean, at that point, all right, you were fired and the guy who said it, but nobody was going to remember it from September. If you win in November in the Iron Bowl at home for the third time in your tenure over Nick Saban and Alabama, then you're the guy who did that, and there's nobody else alive who can make that claim. And you look like that this was ingenious, and the Auburn fans will love it. And as far as any kind of insult to Kent State, who he really wasn't insulting, it was all about Alabama in this. But if it's like, for anybody who initially read it and was like, oh, he's just saying, yeah, let's just get this non-conference nonsense over with and I can just move on with my day because we're going to win by 100. Do you really think that he gives a damn what Kent State has to say? They're cutting them the check. It's the first time these teams are ever going to meet. I can assure you they may never meet again. They could care less if he offended anybody at Kent State. All two of their fans who might arrive at Jordan-Hare Stadium. So that was just particularly amusing. It was a funny line. It was an uncharacteristically funny line, to be quite honest. As I say, when I saw it this morning, I was like, wait a minute. No, I really did want to make sure that was from verified accounts and reporters who were at the press conference because I really couldn't believe he said it. It just didn't. It was not in character and in form, but I understand it. I get it. He has said things regarding rivalry and remarks and stuff like that with the whole player safety 10-second rule debate from years ago and all that stuff. Yes. But that was the game operations, not the time of the kickoff. That was just so that just made this kind of amusing. That's all. It's an amusing remark from a guy who has no personality.
Again, you got West Coast fans out here going, we would love 11 a.m. kickoffs.
I know.
You know, I mean, we're tired of the 8 p.m. kickoffs.
That's why I say, again,
you know,
look, in the SEC, they all want night games. And every SEC fan base other than LSU will tell you how LSU gets beneficial treatment because they get all the night games. Because the legend of Tiger Stadium and et cetera, and the record at home and at night and everything else. And they get preferential treatment. As if, again, that the conference is telling the networks, is dictating to the networks what time the games have to be.
Fine. Give them the late games. Give the Pac-12 the earlier games. Flop the window. Help put some of those guys on at 10 p.m. Eastern and let them have a really late game and have fun.
Well, that literally couldn't happen. But I get the sentiment, but point is, hey, out here it's Pac-12 after dark's no good. We don't want it late. In the SEC, it's we don't want an 11 a.m. kick. I want to tailgate all day.
We'll trade.
I don't want to have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning because hey, the fans here who are complaining about 9 a.m. kicks and you got to get up so early and this and that. What you think that SEC fans with 11 a.m. kicks aren't getting up early?
Later than they would for a 9 a.m. 2 extra hours of sleep.
Not if you're commuting from Huntsville, Alabama to Tuscaloosa or Auburn. You're not.
Okay, but you're trying to commute from Portland to Eugene, and that's an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah, but Huntsville down is like 4 hours is the point. That's why and believe me, it's not just 1 or 2. I'm not talking about 1 or 2. There is a monumental portion of people. I'm just saying everybody's got their gripes. The remark in question was just rather amusing because it comes from somebody with zero personality making said remark. Do we have a winner, Steve?
We have a winner.
For the Oregon State club tickets.
These are for the club section for Oregon State for this Saturday. It's Katie Talke of Springfield.
So congratulations to Katie. She will be going to Saturday's game between Oregon State and Cal Poly. So congratulations to her. If you are still waiting to win the tickets for the Raiders game with the Chiefs on Sunday, a pair of Sweet tickets, and Sweet that is with a UI, Sweet as in Sweet in the building.
That's kind of both, though.
Though they are Sweet with a W-E-E.
Yes.
As well. Yes. Keep listening. We'll be giving those away later on. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. And we now welcome back to the program Mr. Antonio Morales, covers USC for The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at Antonio Morales. Welcome back to the show, man. You're going to be a regular guest here between naming starting quarterbacks and preseason talk, and now another quarterback change due to the injury and an AD search. This is quite the time down in South Central.
Yeah, it's been a busy couple of weeks over here, but it's nothing new for this school, so I just got to get used to it.
Let's start on the AD front. Obviously, Lynn Swann resigning and the search already underway. Who are some of the names you're hearing getting thrown around? Obviously, there's some that are quite common that are being passed around, but who are some that people should be aware of that may be a new athletic director either in the conference or an athletic director potentially within the conference moving, or what's the latest?
I know people throw out like popular candidates like Washington, Jen Cohen, and Washington State's Pat Chun. You obviously have a guy like Mark Jackson of Villanova who has worked at USC before. I don't think USC fans would be too happy with that hire just because there's kind of this association with him and the Steve Sarkisian hire. So I don't know if the USC fans would be too happy with that. Then you have Bubba Cunningham at North Carolina, who's the only AD. Carol Folt, who's USC's new president, has worked with. So those are some of the names you hear right now. But obviously, this job has its issues. There's the 2 federal investigations that it got caught up under. And it has a track record of hiring guys who, are former football players who don't have athletic director experience. It seems like Folt wants to go in a different direction, but we'll see what she does.
It would obviously mean a lot to USC if they go in a very different direction and get somebody who I'll say is competent and skilled in that chair. But it would also mean a lot to the Pac-12 conference. Let's face it, this would mean a lot to the league as a whole, not just because whether SC has success or not in any one sport. You need people in major positions of power to be really competent, and let's face it, Lynn Swann really wasn't. Not in an athletic director capacity. He may be good in various other roles in life, but an athletic director of a Power 5 program, he was not. He just was not.
And yeah, like you said, the conference needs a strong USC to kind of raise the profile, even more. The North schools are doing good stuff. Oregon, Washington. Schools like that, Stanford, Washington State's doing good stuff on the football field. So those schools are handling their business on the field. But the South is kind of lagging behind. Utah's doing some good stuff, but it really needs USC to kind of step its game up. And, it's the main blue blood on the West Coast, and it needs to start performing like it.
And like one area, for instance, just as an example of where I think they're just falling short at the moment is you look at USC's future non-conference scheduling opponents, and I understand Notre Dame is a regular opponent, so you can't criticize like crazy. But to be honest, after next year's season opener with Alabama, which is in Arlington, Texas, back at AT&T Stadium, as Oregon just played this year, there is very little appealing on future non-conference schedules for USC, which is really mind-blowing to look at. I mean, you've got games with Nevada, Fresno State, Rice, UC Davis, and breaking the streak of never playing an FCS opponent. There's a couple of games with BYU, San Jose State. This is just not a very appealing future slate of games for what should be a banner program for the conference. It just isn't. I'm sorry. Outside of the Notre Dame series, which is there indefinitely and forever, it is really hard for somebody, and unfortunately for the new athletic director, there's not a lot of wiggle room to make a change before 2024.
Yeah, this is something I talked to Steve Lobes, who's the senior associate AD at USC, who handles the scheduling, and basically everybody thinks he's pretty much been the AD anyways, and Swan is more of a figurehead. I've talked to him about the scheduling for a long time, and his big thing is they put all this money into the new Coliseum, into the renovations. They want 7 home games a year, so that means they're going to have, those one-off games against Utah State or San Jose State or UC Davis. They're big on their 7 home games. They want to do their neutral site games like against Alabama and schools like that every 4 years and have 7 home games every, those 3 years and alternate with that neutral site game. So this is something they're set on for the foreseeable future. But like you said, it's not very appealing to the fans. It's a home game, but, that's kind of what they have their mindset on right now. They're very firm in their belief of that.
It would be interesting to see when the new stadiums are built in Las Vegas and Los Angeles and the potential for those to be sites of neutral site games in the future. SC could be a candidate. And again, you're talking about years down the road now, but whether it's 24 or 25 or 26, where in particular I think they can make the argument of, all right, one time they play at the new L.A. stadium at Hollywood Park, it'll be a few years into the existence of the renovated Coliseum, and all right, if they're able to work out the right deal, it might make some sense, or Vegas if it makes sense. But I think that's just one of the many areas where that athletic director could make an impact rather quickly, potentially. But again, you don't have a lot of wiggle room for a good number of years. Let's get on to the field, Antonio. Obviously, this past weekend was a pretty big game with Stanford, and boy, did that SC offense behind Kedon Slovis, he had quite the debut for himself. What did you think of this freshman quarterback who most of us had no idea exactly what they were getting, and he
honestly,
really had a day?
It's pretty incredible how he performed. 28 to 33, 377 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. That was about as good a performance as you could ask for out of your true freshman quarterback who was making his first start. But they showed confidence in him right away. The first 6 plays of the game were all pass plays. He scrambled on 2, but they showed confidence in him early, and even late in the game when they were trying to put it away as a 4th and 1 call, and they kept it in his hands. They let him throw, and he made the throw, and it was a 12-yard gain on a 4th and 1. So they had a lot of confidence in him, and Graham Harrell's been kind of big on Slovis. Ever since the spring, he's been talking him up for a while, and on Saturday, Slovis showed why.
Where do you think he needs, beyond consistency? That's the easy thing for anybody to always say. I mean, how can't they? It's start number 2 coming up. But where are some areas where maybe he does need to improve or polish up a little bit, because as more and more tape gets out there on him, defenses are going to know how to play him. So what are some areas that the young man might have to work on?
I just want to see kind of how he reacts when he gets hit some more. Stanford didn't really pressure him that much. So they only got 1 sack on the night. So I kind of want to see him, how he's going to react when the team puts a lot of pressure on him. Fresno State was putting more pressure on him than Stanford was. But in terms of cleaning stuff up, he doesn't really force a lot of stuff, which is rare for a kid his age. He had that 1 interception against Fresno State, but he didn't do anything like that against Stanford. There was 1 play he kind of threw up there for his tight end, and Paulson Adebo made a great play on it. It wasn't really a bad decision or anything. He was pretty good with that on Saturday. So there's nothing obvious that really sticks out right now, but it's a small sample size. I want to see how he kind of handles the road environment and that pressure that BYU will surely bring.
Spread the ball around really nicely. Tyler Vaughn's 5 for 106 and a touchdown, long of 31 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8 for 97, 2 touchdowns, long of 39. Michael Pittman Jr., 6 for 82, long of 31. Drake London, 3 for 62, long of 45. That's pretty nice. That's a pretty nice distribution against the real opponent here. This isn't Oregon, Nevada with 14 guys catching the ball, 7 getting multiple receptions, and an absolute shellacking. This is a really formidable defense that is not used to letting up that kind of yardage and receiving. Again, you mentioned Paulson Adebo. What about this USC receiver core? We knew it was deep, but it really showed in a big way with explosive plays up and down the board against a Stanford secondary that usually doesn't allow that kind of thing.
Yeah, and USC, a big topic of discussion at practice, leading up to the Stanford game was where was the wide receiver rotation at against Fresno State? They only played 4 or 5 guys really. Then they played 7 or 8 this past week, and they're rotating those guys in early, and everybody made a contribution. Drake London was just a freshman, but he made the biggest play of the first drive that kind of set up a field goal. And, Michael Pittman, obviously, all those catches came in the second half, 6 catches for 82 yards. Tyler Vaughn's had another 100-yard game, and Amon-Ra St. Brown was consistent throughout. So they had a lot of contributions from a lot of places. And I think that's something you can see happening throughout the season. It's going to make life easier for Kedon Slovis.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the defense. The stat that stood out to me was 10 tackles for loss. 3 sacks with a new quarterback there. On one hand, not totally shocking, and especially where Stanford's without their best offensive lineman, not just on Saturday, but now we learn for the rest of the season with Walker Little out for the year. But 10 tackles for loss, talented as the SC front is, that is a huge number against a Stanford O-line that just really rarely ever does that. How disruptive can this group be on a week-to-week basis?
Yeah, if you watch Jay Tufele kind of on the interior of the line, he's a very violent player. And he came up with a big 4th-and-1 stop in the fourth quarter of the game. But you have a true freshman like Drake Jackson, who's a disruptive player too. Marlon Tuipulotu on the interior next to Tufele is another guy who's pretty violent. But they got a lot of contributions from a lot of different guys, almost like the receiving core. It's probably the deepest part of the defense. They rotate about 8 guys in that group, and it's the strength of the defense kind of by far. I think the edges are a little vulnerable at times, but the interior is kind of where it starts for them. And through 2 games, Fresno State and Stanford, they haven't really been able to run up the middle on this defense. Stanford had about 1 big run, but in the second half, I think Stanford, after you count all the sacks and stuff, Stanford had like -4 or -6 rushing yards in the second half. So it was a really encouraging performance for USC's defensive front.
I would say so because, Cameron Scarlett, 17 for 82 with a touchdown. On one hand, he averages 4.8 yards per carry. Cotter Weddington has 1 17-yard run. Outside of that, there just was not much going on there. So Stanford ends up 30 carries for 98 yards. I understand 3 of them were some sacks mixed in, but that's pretty low. And, second half negative yardage rushing. Literally, tell me the last time Stanford saw that. And I understand that they're dealing with injuries right now, but mercy. That, for an SC team that many of us had a whole lot of questions heading in, frankly, I'm not sure before the season there would have been a lot of people who would have picked SC to just straight up beat Stanford. Then to tell them that they had to do it with a backup quarterback and win by 3+ touchdowns, you would have been hard-pressed to find virtually anybody who would have believed in that. So in the readership reaction...
17-3 game. Then USC finished on a 42-3 run. It's kind of crazy.
In the readership reaction, in the fan reaction in town, what has it been like the last 48, 72 hours, Antonio, of just are people now starting to, I wouldn't say jump back entirely back on the bandwagon, but there was a lot of optimism and hope. Are people starting to build up after this performance in particular? Because, I don't think a lot of fans probably had any idea what to expect of Slovis, but you see that. you got to be going bananas if you're an SC fan right now.
Yeah, they're a lot more optimistic after this game. I think that was the most fun, USC's had in the game, and their crowd has had in the game, since Sam Darnold was here. Last year had kind of this whole malaise over it. It was kind of, they were just flogging through the season. The crowd wasn't that into it. USC never really put a whole, complete game together. Then, all of a sudden, people had low expectations against Stanford. The backup quarterback was playing, and they just dominate Stanford and go on that 42-3 run to end it. And that, surprised a lot of people. The crowd was engaged. The players were engaged. Everybody seemed to rally behind Kedon Slovis. And that was the most, even Clay Helton said it after the game, was one of the games he had the most fun in his career. So I think there's a lot of optimism. And Lynn Swann wasn't a popular person among the USC fan base. So the fact he resigned 2 days later kind of adds a little bit to it. And I think this fan base thinks that this athletic department can go in a new direction that it needs. So there's a lot of optimism around here right now.
Chatting with Antonio Morales of The Athletic. Let's lead into this weekend's matchup with BYU. Certainly a formidable foe. They opened the year with a loss to Utah in the Holy War, but turned around and responded with a win at Tennessee, who has started the year 0-2, so I don't want to make that win out to be monumental. But nevertheless, for BYU, a pretty nice win. So it's the 1-1 Cougars taking on the Trojans in what is a nationally televised game on ABC. At 12:30 West Coast time. I would think that this is going to have quite a bit of, as you mentioned, the optimism. What should be the areas that for folks who are going to tune in to watch this, given that especially here in Oregon where you've got a Ducks team playing very, very late against an FCS opponent and a Beavers team also playing an FCS opponent. I'm sure there's a lot of Pac-12 fans will be watching other teams this Saturday. What will they be watching in the Trojans against the Cougars on Saturday?
Obviously, it's an explosive offense. I think USC they'll have a decided talent advantage against BYU. BYU, those players, they get upset when you say this, but they're a little more mature. They're a little bit older, on the roster. So I'm interested in kind of seeing the battle of the trenches. USC's up to line has been one of the more encouraging surprises of the season. Through 2 games, they've ran the ball really well, and they've done well in pass blocking. So I think it's been encouraging for USC. It surprised me for sure in the spring or in training camp. They weren't really able to run the ball, but through 2 games they've been doing a pretty good job so far. So it's been interesting to watch that all unfold, and it's kind of unlocked the offense, and they've done a good job protecting Slovis. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I don't think BYU will be able to keep up scoring-wise. They've struggled so far, in their 2 games. In regulation, against Tennessee and then against Utah. So, I think USC will win. I think it'll be competitive, though.
And to just give us an early peek, we'll get you out of here on this, Antonio, because I don't want to be too presumptive, but I would think most people are expecting SC to obviously hold serve and win on Saturday. And Utah, needless to say, will handle Idaho State. So that will set up the marquee game on Friday night at SC on September the 20th on FS1, 6 o'clock West Coast. So that is prime time nationally. How monumental to this season and to Clay Helton's USC tenure will that game be, where you're going to have not just 2 ranked teams? It's possible that Utah's in the top 10. It's possible that SC is in the not just top 20. They may bump up even a little bit more at that point. How big will that game be?
It'll be the biggest of the season. It'll probably decide the Pac-12 South. Utah hasn't won in the Coliseum before. The USC fans kind of think Utah's a different team away from home. They've struggled on the road. They've had some inexplicable losses on the road in the past couple of years. But obviously this one, if USC, continues to look like it has, it could, decide the winner of the Pac-12 South. And obviously it's in September, and USC has the fortunes of playing that game at home, which is good for them. But it'll be interesting to watch on the line of scrimmage, because Utah just dominated USC last year. USC was struggling to get first downs against the Utes. So it'll be interesting to see how this offense attacks Utah and what Graham Harrell has in store for him.
Appreciate you joining us again, Antonio, and I look forward to having you on literally next week to preview that game further, because that will certainly be, as you say, the biggest game in the South for sure, one of the bigger games in all of the Pac-12 this season. So I'll be hitting you up again very soon, my friend.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, man.
Thank you. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. For those who have been listening and those who messaged me on Twitter and asked, when will it happen? When are you giving away the tickets to the Raiders in the suite for Raiders Chiefs on Sunday? Your answer would be right now. Give us a call on the Davis Roofing Hotline, 541-343-KORE. That's 541-343-5673. And you will win.
Caller 10?
Caller 10.
Caller 10
will win the tickets to the Raiders Chiefs game on Sunday. The 1-0 Raiders against the 1-0 Chiefs. Pat Mahomes, reigning NFL MVP, and the video game offense that is the Chiefs against the Raiders and Derek Carr and Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Abram and Colin Farrell, et cetera, et cetera. Give us a call, 541-343-KORE, and do it quickly because several folks already have, and the phone is a-ringing, and the 10th caller will win the pair of tickets to Sunday's game. Elsewhere in the college football world, we mentioned this already a little bit in passing, but yes, Stanford, David Shaw announced today that quarterback KJ Costello, who missed last weekend's game, will return this weekend against UCF, which is number 17, UCF. But that offensive tackle, Walker Little, will have season-ending knee surgery. That is a brutal blow to the Cardinal offensive line, who, as we just spoke about with Antonio Morales, in the loss to SC, allowed 3 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, and to lose a All-American caliber offensive lineman is brutal. I mean, Walker Little is in the conversation. For those who, look, I understand very few people really truly cover Stanford on a day-to-day basis, so you're not seeing a lot by way of coverage and stories written about the Cardinal on a day-to-day basis. But Walker Little is in the conversation of the Shane Lemieux, Calvin Throckmorton, Penei Sewell conversation of linemen, okay? He is right on up there. This is a first-team All-Pac-12, first-team All-American caliber offensive lineman. He was number 14 on Mel Kiper's preseason big board into the draft, okay? That's the level of talent that Stanford just lost. That is brutal to lose up front. But the good news being that Costello is back. The bad news being, obviously, the loss to the offensive line, which is devastating. Devastating. Now, that said, strictly from a competitive standpoint, obviously for Walker Little, you feel just absolutely horrific for that young man who is going to lose the season. Lose what would have been a very big and important season for him. From a strictly competitive wins and losses standpoint, it certainly makes this weekend's game for Stanford more difficult against UCF, and it makes the game with Oregon coming up the following week, and that game being televised on ESPN at 4 o'clock on the 21st. Look forward to having on, hopefully, some folks from ESPN before that during next week's show leading up to that game. But it makes that game that much harder for Stanford, which I know Ducks fans are not going to cry about. And it makes that offensive line of Stanford a little bit more vulnerable to the Ducks in the defensive front and the pressure that Andy Avalos has been creating with that defense. So that would be quite amusing to see from a competitive standpoint. Would have been great if Walker Little played, and would have been a great clash of titans by way of strong defensive linemen that are quickly emerging for the Ducks against one of the better offensive linemen in the country. They're going to have to wait a little while, potentially probably for Washington and Trey Adams and Nick Harris, because it looks like Stanford they definitely will be without Walker Little, and we'll see what else shakes out between now and then. Elsewhere, Arkansas changing quarterbacks, now going with Nick Starkel, who was a grad transfer from Texas A&M. He replaces Ben Hicks for Saturday's game against Colorado State. Hicks had struggled against Ole Miss. Starkel stepped in, went 17-24 for 201 yards and a touchdown. And Chad Morris, who's in his second year at Arkansas, said, wasn't so much what Ben did or didn't do, it's what Nick did. We were looking for a spark, something to get our offense moving, create some momentum, create some yards, give an opportunity for some big plays. And to be quite honest, on one hand, Ben Hicks had followed Chad Morris from SMU over to Arkansas. But anybody who had watched Nick Starkel play in the SEC while at A&M, to be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised he wasn't just the starter from the jump because he's a pretty talented player. I'm not going to tell you he's a phenomenal quarterback or anything. He's a really talented player. It's kind of surprising he wasn't there to begin with, but he's now the starter. So a changing of the guard at one of the SEC bottom feeders who at the moment may not be that very much on the bottom given how bad Tennessee has been in particular. So it will, again, give us a call on the Davis Roofing Hotline at 541-343-KORE and try and be that 10th caller, which I believe we are right up against.
We already got it.
We got it.
Yeah.
We have gotten it.
We got 10 calls really quick.
I was going to say. I saw every time I looked up, the light was going, so I didn't know if we were up against it or we had passed it. I figured we very well probably had passed it at that point. So we will tell you who the winner is and congratulate them. So thank you, everybody, for listening, for who wanted to get those tickets. We will have additional tickets to give away throughout the week. Not more for the Raiders Chiefs, unfortunately, for those who wanted those. That was quite special.
Yes.
So we will let you know who won those momentarily. But if you want to win a pair of tickets to Oregon State, again, we will have a pair of tickets to give away later in the week. If you want to wear a pair of tickets, that might be a little bit thin. If you want to win a pair, there we go. You can't mush words together. Anyway, if you want to win a pair of tickets to the Ducks taking on Montana on Saturday, we will have them as well later in the week. So keep listening, and we will let you know on which day you can win those. You've been listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. The winner of the pair of tickets for the Raiders-Chiefs game on Sunday and the sweet tickets, literally sweet tickets, is Philip Larson of Eugene. So congratulations to Philip. He gets the pair of tickets to the Raiders-Chiefs Sunday in a suite. So congratulations to him. Appreciate you listening. Again, for those who want to win another pair of tickets to Oregon State Cal Poly, or a pair of tickets to Oregon and Montana, keep listening throughout the week, and we have more pairs of tickets to give away.
See, we got to bribe him to listen.
Oh, I don't know about that.
That was a pretty good bribe, though.
That was pretty good, though.
That was a pretty good bribe.
That was
a thank you for the Oakland Raiders for us being an affiliate.
For sure. Yes, starting there, but
so
yes, that worked rather nicely.
Yeah.
So. Elsewhere in the college sports world, let's start in the Pac-12. Saw this a little bit earlier. Arizona safety Tristen Cooper, who Oregon fans will remember as the defender who concussed Dylan Mitchell last season on the big hit over the middle in that game. Tristen Cooper, and then said that he was trying to knock Mitchell out of the game.
Great. Yeah.
Tristen Cooper was talking to folks today in interviews in Arizona and addressed the fans who are clamoring for defensive coordinator Marcel Yates to be fired because Arizona is currently the worst defense in the Pac-12. The worst defense in the league.
And you said it was Oregon State.
Oh, give it time.
Oh, man.
Give it time. But I, at no point, at any point, did I ever defend Arizona's defense. Just give it time. Here's the line from Tristen Cooper. It was a longer, lengthier response, but what it boils down to. Quote, there's a lot of outside noise. The same people that are talking mess about us today are going to be on our bandwagon after we beat Texas Tech.
If you beat Texas Tech.
I was going to say if. But if they do, and Texas Tech is going through a little bit of a rebuild themselves. Matt Wells is going over there. You know, Cliff Kingsbury was there before. You can't say that he left the cupboard completely bare, but they weren't winning. Kingsbury's not there because he got fired, not because he decided to just walk off and momentarily take the OC job at SC before becoming the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Cliff Kingsbury got fired. So Matt Wells still inherited something that needs to be built up a little bit. I'm not telling you that Arizona is definitively going to win. We'll get into that Friday when we make our picks. But fact is, Arizona's going to be at least competitive. If not, they very well might beat Texas Tech. But if they win in a shootout, I don't think it's going to stop people from clamoring for Marcel Yates to be out the door. And Cooper goes on to say in a lengthier response about it, basically, hey, look, if it happens, it happens. There's a business to this. There's reality to it. He doesn't want it to happen. They like him. They like playing for him, et cetera, et cetera. But, yes, of course, they hear this kind of stuff. But to those who want it, he's got a little bit of that. And that the general consensus that always gets out there in these situations, the mob is fickle. That the players may not necessarily know the origins of the quote, but the mob is fickle. They care about wins and losses and results, and the results start getting better. They're not going to worry as much about whether Marcel Yates is the defensive coordinator or not. And he's got a little bit of merit there. Elsewhere, drew a little bit of news in the college football world. Texas is being criticized quite a bit because their visiting football locker room does not have air conditioning. And it is obviously quite hot in Austin. So when LSU was just there, or Louisiana Tech was there the week before, apparently this was quite an issue. And Louisiana Tech officials told LSU officials, so they were aware, so they could at least, while they did not get air conditioning in, they got, Orgeron just called them blowers. So whether or not they're literally just like space fans or really just bigger like industrial kind of fans or whatever, bottom line, they got some air circulating, so it was better than what Louisiana Tech had to deal with, but not great. And I will say these are some of the things that fans don't ever get to see, usually, especially the visiting locker room. What would you ever really know or care? But that is one of the big chasms in college athletics, is the visiting locker rooms for football in particular, because the buildings are just older. And some in college basketball, even in somewhat newer buildings, some of them are downright awful. Awful. I mean, I've seen locker rooms that you say like, oh, they needed air conditioning. When it's 90 plus something degrees outside and hot and humid and all the rest, yeah, it wouldn't be bad. Because when you get into these old brick, 50 plus year old locker rooms, it's worse in there. It's like going in a Navy ship, and it's like going in a submarine. It didn't get better; it got worse.
It's the home field advantage.
This isn't talking about Iowa's pink visiting locker rooms. This is talking about, in some cases, legitimate health concerns. So this is one that drew some criticism, and then Texas is coming out trying to say, "Oh, well, what? We didn't hear about it. We didn't get formal complaints." It's like, yeah, formal complaint. Yeah. That's the issue, whether or not it was a formalized complaint. Is it the reality or not? And look, this came up last year. I believe it was either last year or 2 years ago when Michigan had the whole ordeal at Iowa with Harbaugh weighing in regarding like X-ray capability and whatnot at the building and all that. This happens. And this is happening at the major level. Can you only imagine what happens at the lower levels? In the group of five or worse at the FCS level? Do you have any idea what some of these college athletes are being subjected to? I'm not talking about, oh, well, they didn't get first-class airfare or chartered flights. No. I'm talking about situations where you are physically exhausted and you're going into locker rooms or facilities that are atrocious, to where if you literally were in a room in a motel, well, I'll just say a motel. I'm not going to throw a brand out there. In a roadside motel would be ritzier conditions. Awful in some cases. Here was one that was a little off the grid that really started to pick up and drew a lot of momentum and criticism, deservedly so, on Saturday. and has now led to various responses and statements from every party involved and national organizations, etc. So, not that I'm expecting there to be a lot of field hockey fans out there, but listen for a moment. Kent State had its football game on Saturday. Kent State is obviously not very good, but they had their football game on Saturday. Their field hockey team was playing. They hosted a couple of teams. Temple and Maine were playing a game at Kent State because it was all part of a multi-day event. The game went to overtime. It had to go to a second overtime. They called the game that had already gone through regulation and a first overtime, declared it a no contest because it was starting to be a conflicting time up against kickoff of the football game, and there were pregame fireworks nearby, and the fire marshal and whatnot said that because of the general proximity that the game on the field hockey field had to end. It has drawn criticism across the country. Kent State has had to issue remarks and apologize for it, as they well should, because that is outrageous. If it were the home team, players should threaten to quit if you were a home team in that situation. Ridiculous. Tomorrow's guest will be Jason Kersey of The Athletic, covers Oklahoma, and Frank Gagola covers Montana.